Hello and welcome to the Imprint Weekly Podcast. I'm John Kelly, Senior Editor of the Imprint, a daily news site covering child welfare and youth justice around the country. You can read all of our coverage at imprintnews.org or check us out on Facebook or Twitter at the Imprint News. You can also sign up on our homepage for our free weekly and monthly newsletters. And for professionals in child welfare and youth justice, subscribe to our Youth Services Insider section for a closer look at news on business policy and practice. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is also a member of the Safe Camp Audio Network. Check out our show page and all of Safe Camp's other great podcasts at safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safe Camp Audio on social media. On today's episode, we are joined by Liz Ryan. We recorded this interview with Miss Ryan in November, but are releasing it on Inauguration Day, which I'm assuming is her last day in the Biden administration, where she served as the administrator for the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or OJJDP. Now, that is a relatively small corner of the Department of Justice that has a number of things in its portfolio that include serving missing and exploited children, mentoring, things like that. But the agency was started around and still monitors state compliance with the JJDPA, which is the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. And to this day, that constitutes sort of the minimum federal standards around the treatment of kids who are involved, particularly who are incarcerated in any way in the criminal justice system. So Administrator Ryan started her time in the Biden administration off with a listening tour that she used to kind of push a three-prong agenda: treating children as children, serving children at home with their families, and increasing opportunities for system-involved youth. We spoke with Administrator Ryan as she was sort of getting started on that path in episode, I think it was actually episode 100 even, of the Imprint Weekly Podcast. This time around, we talked to her about what she believes OJJDP accomplished on those fronts. We talked a little bit about the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, which turned 50 in 2024. And we talked about the recent national conference that OJJDP had held in Washington, D.C. in November, just a week after the election, which featured a very stirring keynote speech from famous lawyer Brian Stevenson, whose work has been at the heart of limiting the exposure of juvenile defendants to life without parole sentences, things like that, and had a lot of participation by young leaders with lived experience. So without further ado, here is our conversation with outgoing OJJDP Administrator Liz Ryan. Liz Ryan, who serves as administrator of the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for the Biden administration, joined us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast. It's about 2 years ago now for the 100th episode, actually, of the podcast. She was fresh off a listening tour used to help inform what the administration would do with their time in office when it came to this subject. We are now joined in person by Administrator Ryan at the end of the 2024 National Conference on Youth Justice. Administrator Ryan, thanks for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast again.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
As is pro forma on this podcast, we got to get these folks to know you a little bit before we get into the serious stuff. So I'll give you the favorites categories again: books, musical group, movie, TV show, sports team. I'll refresh your memory. You gave me U2 as your favorite band last time, so you got to give me something new. What do you got?
Oh my gosh, I was going to say U2 again, but
you really love them.
I really do love that band. No, you know what? I will say that at the conference, the young people picked the walk-up music for me. So, and I can't even remember the names of all the bands that they had, but people seem to really like it. That's a tough question, John. There's so many things that I like.
What's the last movie you watched that you really enjoyed? I'll make it easy for you.
One of my favorite movies is All the President's Men, and I see it every year.
Great pick. Yeah. Love that. Okay. U2 and All the President's Men. So to my recollection, this is the first national big conference put on by OJJDP since 2011. I'm assuming they are put on at the discretion of the agency and the leadership, not really mandatory since we went that long. So what made you decide to do this? What was the impetus for this one?
That is such a great question. Well, there were a couple of impetuses for it. One is that I actually went to the 2011 national conference that OJJDP had at National Harbor, and it was such an opportunity to connect with so many people in the field and learn so many great things and get inspired. I remember Father Boyle spoke at that. We had several thousand people come to that, and I felt like when I got here, I asked about whether or not we do conferences like that, and one of the longtime staff members from OJJDP said, we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary, you should do something then. And so we literally thought about it and said, sometimes conferences at the federal level tend to be with like the training and technical assistance providers and just the grantees of that organization. And doing a national conference like this really offers an opportunity to engage everyone in the field, not just grantees, and to tap the expertise of everyone in the field. And so literally we set the dates 2 years ago. And several of our staff, Jill Moulter and Jim Antal, led the effort, along with every single person on our staff played a role. And so it was an opportunity to really sort of put out our Sunday best for the whole field. And that's why we chose to do it. And, the timing really, we could have done it at any time, but something like this takes a big effort. And it's not something that's required, but we felt like it was critically important to do.
I'm curious, was it strategic as you guys sort of deciding like when and where to do it in this period that was going to be after the election? It kind of occurred to me that that's kind of an important, like, if you're doing it before everybody knows, it changes the dynamic in some way, I guess.
Well, I'll say we chose this location specifically. I wanted it to be in Washington, D.C., because that's where our office has been for 50 years, and I wanted people to have the opportunity to come to D.C. and take advantage of all the things that the city has to offer while they're here enjoying the conference. And it also lends itself to including other federal agencies. This conference, we did what they did in the 2006 conference where they had the Federal Coordinating Council of Juvenile Justice co-sponsor. So we asked them to co-sponsor. So that meant we would have the benefit of having 14 federal agencies along with the practitioner experts who were on that panel. And they contributed a whole leadership track of sessions for people about AmeriCorps, Health and Human Services, Department of Labor. Just fantastic, U.S. Department of Agriculture. So we heard about all their programs and services, and I think that it made it easy for them to participate because they are based here. In terms of the timing, when you have a conference that has 2,500 people, there's only a few places that can do it and only a few times that can happen, and it takes a couple years. So really, it came down to there were only a few dates that were available, and I picked this one because I thought it was either August or November, and I felt like August people are on vacation, and it's also really hot in D.C. So from a practical standpoint, this was the date that was available, and I think that it turned out to be a really great timing, so that it was after the election, so it wasn't connected with that in any way, and it was before the Thanksgiving holiday, so we had that 1 week where we could do it.
Right on, yeah.
That's how we got that on the calendar. Yeah. One
clear difference between this conference and the last one is, because I think it was like roughly the same amount of people, like at 2,500, it was like a little under that, is that, like in my recollection, all the people that were at that last one were adults. Like I might have been one of the youngest people at that conference at that time. Now I have gray hair. And there were just a ton of young people here. So I'm wondering, I think I would be interested to know what the process was for that, how you guys engineered that, because it was, it's noticeable. There's just a lot of young people roaming the halls and participating in the panels. So that's a big lift when you get a lot of young people to one city in one day and stuff like that. So how'd that all go down?
Well, it was very intentional, John. You heard on the panel this morning, Kyla Woods talk about convening that OJJDP had 2 years ago with our state juvenile justice specialists and the state advisory groups and the designated state agencies. So the youth justice stakeholders who deal with the Title II money under the JDDPA come together once a year, once every other year. And we had a meeting 2 years ago in December in San Diego, and the young people that were at that conference similarly were involved in the conference, and they came up with their list of recommendations, and they said, we want the next big conference of OJJDP to really have more young people here and have young people not just kind of be invited here, but actually help to shape the conference. So our team put together a youth consultant group of young leaders who we paid, compensated the same way we would compensate any consultant for OJJDP. And that group literally shaped every aspect of this conference. And so things like they wanted young people from every state and territory. They wanted to be able to have reimbursement, travel, that sort of thing, hotel covered, so that young people who would be coming could be offered scholarships so that they could meaningfully participate. And they also said, when we come to this, we want to meet the other young people before all the adults show up. So they actually wanted their own networking session. So we had that on Monday. They said, we want kind of pad folios, so we look professional. We want professional headshots. We want to be on all the panels. We want to help recommend what are all the topics. And so they literally shaped every aspect of this. And so it wasn't just we built the architecture and then we slotted them in. They actually helped us from the ground up. And I think we learned a lot through that process in doing that. And part of the rationale for doing that is that it's one of our central priorities, centering directly impacted youth and their families, and to do it in a meaningful and authentic way. We felt very strongly that if OJJDP has that as one of our overarching priorities, we have to walk the walk. We can't just tell the field, well, you have to work with young people, or you should really meaningfully partner with young people when we aren't doing it ourselves. So we felt that it was critically important that we model what we want to see out there. And I think we learned a lot through that process, and we're hoping that that can really inform the work going forward.
Do you feel like you guys have kind of built an infrastructure here for that to continue? And do you feel like we have that in general in the country?
Well, I think from OJJDP's standpoint, again, this was our staff really coming up with great ideas. Our division director for the Youth Justice System Innovation Division, Kelly Blue, said we really should put together a youth and family partnership working group. And we can invite staff from across the agency to join, and that group can look at all of our business operations. What are the points across which we do our work where we can meaningfully partner with youth and families? So we have a dedicated group of staff and leadership who have been working for the past 2.5 years together collectively. And as we've brought on new staff, they've continued to, actively work together. And again, that group, for example, they helped to shape some of the conference sessions around youth and family partnership for conference attendees. And that group also worked with the young people to develop this whole leadership track for young people, because that was the other thing that the young people wanted. Was they wanted this to be a youth-friendly space, the entire conference. They wanted leadership workshops that they could select and that they could help shape what the content was. But then they also wanted to be able to go to any session they wanted. So that's how that sort of came together. And I think that OJJDP's working group has done terrific work, and I anticipate they're going to keep going. People are very committed to this work and very committed to this. We've also set an expectation for the field. I think we've set a pretty high bar, but we've also learned a lot from other federal agencies that have done this, like in the foster youth space, youth formerly in foster care. And as the language evolves too, like we talk about lived experts, I saw an acronym LEX, and I was like, what is LEX? Oh, lived experts. And so we're learning and growing, and I think we were very intentional about making sure that it's not a one-time thing or a one-off thing, that this is actually ongoing work, and that there's a way to operationalize that within OJJDP. Yeah. Also, in doing the sessions around authentic partnership with young people and family members, we had a group of family members who also were part of that consultant pool and who helped to advise us. And so they worked collectively on a toolkit, and they showcased the toolkit here at the conference, and that'll be coming out very soon. But the idea was to really give more tools to the field to be able to do that work. And it has a list of resources on it, and it has some advice about that. We know that more has to get done. We know that what Jeremiah Brown was talking about, we want to do things, but then we fall short on the implementation. We really want to help with the implementation of that. So that's something that we've trained all of our training and technical assistance providers on. Authentic youth and family partnership type work. We know more needs to be done there, and we want to make sure that we're supporting the grantees. Let me tell you about a couple other things on that front, though, so you can kind of see how OJJDP is trying to fully embrace this at all levels. We have a model where we have training and technical assistance providers work with grantees on a particular set of strategies related to a particular program, right? So we have the Second Chance Act funding that we get. We have a terrific training and technical assistance provider that works with a whole swath of grantees that are doing reentry programs for young people. And so this past year, we, put out a solicitation for a training and technical assistance provider to do that work, continue to do that work. And we said part of that would mean hiring at least 2 young people with lived experience to be part of the TA team, right? So those young people, they would be called youth fellows. They would both contribute their expertise in the training and technical assistance work, right? So they'd be on the ground supporting the training for reentry grantees, but then they'd also learn the ropes on how to be a training and technical assistance provider. And so AIR is our TTA provider for the Second Chance Act, and they ended up hiring 3 young people with lived experience. And so that was kind of piloting, really embedding the young people on the ground in the work. And that's something that OJJDP hopes to continue. And I think that model is something that we're really excited by. And it's a way to ensure that there's a mutually beneficial aspect of it. It's authentic, right? We're not just bringing young people in and they do a speech and then go away. They actually are helping to shape what the TTA looks like, but then they're also learning how you do that, right? So they're part of every TTA encounter with the grantees.
So the conference began, well, I know you went first, but Brian Stevenson keynoted on the first day, spoke about his concern for narratives of fear and anger in the country, challenged everybody to kind of combat that with proximity to people and hopefulness. You described the moment that we're in as an inflection point. As you wind up your time here at OJJDP, what worries you? What gives you optimism about the state of youth justice?
That is such a good question. I see it as an inflection point because, 50 years is a big milestone. And it's an opportunity for us to look back at what we've done, what we've accomplished, but it's also an opportunity for us to look forward. And that's why our conference was really focused on shaping the next 50 years of youth justice and thinking forward. And so for me, I have boundless optimism because I think we came into this conference and just were really uplifted by all the messages of hope and messages of collaboration and partnership, and really we're in this together. No matter what happens going forward in the future, we're all committed to our young people. And we know there are some jurisdictions that have looked at media reports or data and are concerned about some increases in youth arrests over a 1-year period. I call that a fluctuation. It's not a trend. And that's not an excuse to step back on what we've done on youth justice reform. To me, it's a call to action about doubling down on what works. So I'm optimistic about the future, and I just seeing all those young people today and throughout the conference talk about, their dreams, their aspirations, and I feel that it's our job to really support them in achieving that. And so that's where I'm focused. Look, I know that I'm only here till January 20th, and I can't predict the future. But what I do know is that the field is united in our commitment to young people, and that this conference was an opportunity to both provide the practical tools and resources and connections on all of the, I think, most innovative and creative programming around the continuum of care, prevention, intervention, reentry, but also as an opportunity to really inspire people. And that's why having Brian Stevenson there and Dr. Sean Ginwright and Jeremiah Brown and the Attorney General and AAG Cohen, having these leaders talk about their perspectives on this really, I think, help people to sort of see we're in it for the long game here, right? And that there may be changes of administrations. There's always elections every year, every other year, every 4 years, presidential, but that this work continues on the ground no matter who's in office.
Sure. Last time you were on with me, you discussed kind of the 3 priorities that you guys had set out: treating children as children, serving young people at home, opening up opportunities for youth. You want to just reflect a little on, maybe give folks kind of what you feel like the best or biggest stride we made in these years was on each one of those 3?
My first day on the job, I had this whiteboard on the wall, and I wrote down treat children as children, serve children at home with their families and in their communities, and open up opportunities for young people who are involved in the justice system. And then I also wrote our 2 overarching principles, which are commitment to racial equity and fairness, and a promise to partner with directly impacted youth and their families. And so our team, every time we get together, every time we're thinking about what our next steps are, those 5 things are the priorities that guide our work. And so I can say on each of them, we have made progress on trying to take a step forward, take many steps forward. So let me give you an example. And there's many, many, many examples, and we're happy to share a list with you. If you
just hit the highlights here, but you can say, sure.
Yeah, so under Treat Children as Children, we launched the Children's Justice Project earlier this year. There are roughly 1,000 children who are deceased but not identified, who are in morgues across the country. So these are children, between infants and age 18, who may have run away, may have gone missing, may have been killed or murdered, but they're not identified. And our team felt strongly that we need to take the kind of steps that are needed to identify these children, right? DNA analysis, forensic genealogy. And so we worked with the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children to launch this program. And we found the resources to do this and felt that that's something where, the dignity of those children, giving those families answers was critically important and something that we needed to do. Another thing that we launched this year was the Child Victimization Prosecution Project. Every day when I read news clips, I see what's going on across the juvenile justice system across the country, and I see the harm that children are exposed to when they're detained or incarcerated in many places around the country. In fact, I think there's 30 states that are under some type of legal action by the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, or by private attorneys, or by something happening in, at the state level around conditions of confinement for children in those facilities. And often the staff, if there is a lawsuit going on, the staff are just put on administrative leave, or they're moved to another facility, or they just leave and go to another state. And there's very little accountability for their actions when they harm children. We felt that it was important that prosecutors would be trained up to actually investigate and prosecute cases of harm of children in out-of-home placements in the juvenile justice system and in the child welfare system. So we launched that project this year. And that's something that we feel is very, very important in treating children as children. We also, and I'll just mention one, because these are all in different spaces, because our work really covers the whole waterfront, is that OJJDP also provides resources for communities around juvenile justice reform. And we felt that it was very important that we help to accelerate those reforms and that we get those resources out. One of the ways that we're doing that is through the continuum of care, and that's sort of making sure that those gaps that exist in services and supports for children and young people are filled, right? So it covers both treating children as children, because we feel that children really shouldn't be in the justice system in the first place. Most children should never come into contact with the justice system in the first place. And we want to really accelerate the work in the prevention space. But we also want to make sure that when a young person touches the system, that we do everything we can to help them get back on track and not go deeper into the system.
What have you seen the grantees in that space sort of rallying around or choosing to kind of pursue in that space of alternatives to incarceration and things like that?
Yeah, there's a number of things. So, and each community is different. So right now we have about 30 grantees. They received money from fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 to do the continuum of care. And under the continuum of care, they are undertaking a process by which they're doing community asset mapping, right? So they're working with community stakeholders, young people, family members, community-based organizations, justice system stakeholders, to really look at what they're offering to young people, where some of the gaps are. We focus this effort in places that have high incarceration rates. But this process of sort of determining that could really be utilized anywhere. So these early sites that are now undertaking this process and starting to identify and prioritize with community, with young people, what these gaps are, those are then things that they can put out there as blueprints for like, this is our priority. This is how we want to utilize resources, invest local resources, county, state, federal, and other federal agencies in addition to OJJDP. So it's early in that process. We're in the second year of doing that, but we put out this framework so everybody could see it, right? It was, you saw some of that language in the 2018 reauthorization. We felt like it was important to put out a visual that kind of gives people an idea of what we're talking about, but they can really adopt their own strategies. But it's many of the things that you would expect, John. I mean, what we're hearing from sites is they really want more resources for prevention. There's, and when I say prevention, I mean investing in youth in their communities and meeting their basic needs, right? Making sure that kids have access to housing, they have access to education, they have access to food, that they are able to walk to school and feel safe, that they're able to access, workforce opportunities and things like that. So all the kind of basic things that every kid needs, we want to, we're hearing from communities that they want to make sure that those things are being met. We also know that in terms of other aspects of this, that on the intervention side, that too many young people go further into the system because there is a lack of community-based alternatives to detention and incarceration. And so kids end up getting locked up because they have high needs, not because they have high risk. And so that's really an area where I think there will be a lot of focus. And then the other piece, again, this is what I'm hearing, but when these jurisdictions come out with their reports, you'll get to see the specifics. On the reentry piece, making sure that it isn't just we're handing a young person a couple of tools and then they got to do it on their own. Really, you want to have community-based supports for that young person while they're in that facility. And so that they've already built connections with community, that they're ready to move on with their life, they're ready to go to school or ready to work, or that they have housing, and that all that stuff is put in place before they leave. So that's really what the focus of that is. But that's all on our website. Happy to share it with you so you can see who's doing that work. And I also say on the opening up opportunities for young people, we thought in that space, there's a lot of things that we've done, but one of the things I'm most proud of our team for doing is we partner with AmeriCorps to create opportunities for young people to serve in their communities and to be paid and have some money for college or to pay back student loans, and also opportunities for credible messengers, people with lived experience to work with justice-involved youth. And so we partnered with AmeriCorps 2 years ago, and really that came about for a couple of reasons. At our coordinating council meeting, the first one that we had, Michael Smith, who runs the AmeriCorps program, literally was sitting right next to me. And I said, "Oh, Michael, so great to meet you. I was in AmeriCorps 30 years ago." And then it turns out Amy Solomon, who was my boss at the time, said, "Well, I was in AmeriCorps." And it turns out Amy and I were AmeriCorps in the same place, not at the same time. But we got talking to Michael and said, how can we collaborate to really expand the support? And
that's well timed, because I think the research kind of came out this year that, while AmeriCorps has been running for a long time, the amount of, opportunity youth, right, that might really most benefit from that were not a big part of who was participating in AmeriCorps.
Well, I will just tell you that because of our partnership with them, they made young people who are justice involved one of their top priorities. And so that not only impacts the funding that people apply directly to AmeriCorps from, AmeriCorps gives money to state service commissions across the country, and that is one of the priorities for AmeriCorps. So the state service commissions are also providing resources for that. So this year we launched we were able to resource 12 organizations across the country serving, we can get you the data, lots of young people. And that was super exciting because it wasn't just the resource we put in, AmeriCorps put in a tremendous amount of resources from their end as well. And then we're learning together as we're doing the work.
Very cool. Also happening on the foster care side. It's good to see. Oh. Having been inside here I'm talking about it's like it's an institution. Having been with OJJ now for a while and having had a career where you would advocate to them from the outside, what do you think OJJDP as it currently exists is in the best position to help the field with? And what do you think the field needs from this agency that it's not currently in a position to provide? I guess by that I mean Congress would need to give you different power or authority or funding, both sides of that coin.
I mean, here's what I would say, and I can only speak to my experience here. I think that OJJDP has played a key role in supporting the field, and just as evidenced by this conference, wanting to be a convener. I think that's a role that OJJDP is well positioned to do. We are also well positioned to respond to the needs of the field, and OJJDP has operationalized that through listening sessions, through meetings. We're doing that on a regular basis, and it's part of the everyday work that each of our programs is doing and that we're also doing across OJJDP. When I came here, I did listening sessions with stakeholders across all of our programs, and again, not just our grantees, but people who've never been a grantee of OJJDP, people who've been impacted by the justice system but don't even know what OJJDP is. And that was both to engage the field more, but also to really hear from them. And I think that's part of our, that's a muscle we hadn't really exercised for a long time. And now we're getting in great shape because OJJDP is constantly doing that. We did that with the Coordinating Council. The second meeting of the Coordinating Council, we hosted a group of young people and family members impacted by the justice system to hear from them ways that they thought we could really collaborate with federal agencies to serve young people, and really with a big focus on keeping young people out of the justice system. So that's a everyday part of our work. I feel like OJJDP is very well positioned to do that. I'd have to think about the second part of that question. I think there's so much potential. And
well, you must have, in these many conversations, right?
Yeah.
Heard from people, we just need help with this. We just need more support for that. And yeah, I mean, it's only natural. Every agency is as big as it can be. You must leave some of those being like, man, I wish we could.
Well, look, there's always the resource issue. I think that there is a higher demand than we can fulfill for our competitive grants. And you can look at that by seeing how many applications there are and how many we funded versus how many came in, right? So there's high demand for our programs, which is, it's good that there's a high demand because we're being attentive to what the field needs. But it's also tells me that, we could always use more resources. I mean, the other thing I would say is that there is concern over, conditions of confinement in juvenile correctional facilities. And we play a certain role in that. Civil Rights Division plays a certain role in that, right? They litigate if in certain specific instances. And we're on the other end where we're trying to support improving conditions of confinement. We offer training and technical assistance to state system leaders and to correctional administrators, detention center directors. So we do certain things and Civil Rights Division does certain things, and we collaborate and share information, but really we have different roles. And sometimes there's confusion about what our roles are. But I think OJJDP, I'm confident of how our staff works with the field. Our staff it comes from the field, right? So many of our staff have worked in the field and have worked in different youth programs. We have folks that have run a facility. We have folks that have done advocacy work. We have people who were CASA volunteers or AmeriCorps volunteers, like all across. We have people who are system impacted. So I think our team is well positioned because they have been in the field, and that's why they're at OJJDP. There's a high degree of passion and dedication to young people in our agency, which makes me very proud to work with that team.
Your successor, when appointed, is certainly going to be a conservative person. You've worked with politicians and community leaders all over the country. So I'll give you an opportunity here that maybe you'll pass on. But are there some right-leaning youth justice experts you'd like to see the Trump administration consider? And regardless of who it is, what's your advice for the person who succeeds you?
Well, I'll pass on the first part of that question. I'd have to think about that.
You're lost.
But let me say, John, that youth justice is a bipartisan issue. In my experience, I worked with folks in more than 30 states on legislative and policy and practice reforms, and I have seen folks on both sides of the aisle work effectively on this issue. And so this is not a right-leaning or left-leaning issue. This is something about young people, which I think people really care about young people. The question to me is, really fully realizing the supports that young people need and making that commitment to investing in our youth. And so that's, for me, is what our challenge is. And I hope whoever comes in after me, look, this has been the honor of a lifetime to serve in this role. And I hope that is the same for whoever comes in after me. And I'm happy to support them in any way I can. My best advice to them would be, you've got an amazing staff, work with your staff, because they are so dedicated. And I mean, you heard the Attorney General say, really lift up OJJDP staff and what dedicated civil servants they are. And I know after 2.5 years of working day in and day out with them, every day I'm more and more inspired by what they do.
You mentioned earlier that you plan to be here until January 20th. That was one of the questions I had.
Yes, January 20th at noon. Yep.
So that means you only have a few months left. You've talked quite a bit about what you guys have done. What in these 2 months are you hell-bent on getting done before your time is up? What's on the agenda for these next?
Well, one thing I can tell you is I know you follow the Coordinating Council on Juvenile Justice, and this Coordinating Council has done amazing work. They have really worked hard to collaborate on recommendations to Congress and the administration, and they approved those recommendations back at the September 19th meeting. And so we're excited that the report will be coming out on that. You heard Principal Deputy Associate Attorney General Ben Miser talk about that report coming out. So I know that's one that will be coming over the finish line very soon. I think for me, I just want to make sure that I haven't left anything on the table, that we've set out to do everything that we wanted to do on our priorities. So there'll still be more things happening over these next couple of months, and that's why I'm staying till that last moment. But I know that our staff will continue to carry the work forward. I'm very proud of the work they do and recognize that change can be challenging, but I'm confident that they're going to be able to keep it moving forward.
OJJDP Administrator Liz Ryan, thank you for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks to Liz Ryan for joining us today. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safe Camp Audio on all major social media. This podcast is produced and mixed by Christine Anjoko with music by Luke Giroux and Cyrus Elia. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would consider subscribing or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And we would greatly appreciate if you'd consider supporting our work here on the podcast and in print. Small donations from our listeners and readers go a long way towards helping us grow and cover more great stories in child welfare and youth justice. To support us, it is very easy. Just visit imprintnews.org/donate. You can follow The Imprint on Twitter and Facebook by searching the handle @TheImprintNews and visit us on the web at imprintnews.org. You can always reach us over email at tips@imprintnews.org. I'm John Kelly, and we'll see you next week.